Hello, this video is to demonstrate working in joined rounds in Amigurumi crochet. I've got a few patterns now that recommend working in the round or in joined rounds instead of in the spiral, and I'm getting a lot of questions about it. So I thought I would do a tutorial video. So before we get started, the basic difference between working in joined rounds versus spiral rounds is that in joined rounds, every single round starts and finishes in a complete circle, whereas in the spiral, like your round one would finish, say, here, and then round two would go around and finish there. So they end up kind of stacking one on top of the other. And when you're looking at the final finished product, the stitches in a joined pattern, single crochet, will be one on top of the other, exactly like that. Whereas if you're working in the spiral, each row will be just a little bit offset from the next one, and that's because of the nature of working in a spiral. As well, your last round tends to kind of stick out a little bit. You can finish that up with a couple slip stitches and it's not too noticeable. But if you're working in stripes of color or other shapes, like in the Domokun pattern, if you want to actually have the mouth color be just crochet, you need to work joined instead of spiral, because if you do it in spiral, his mouth will be diagonal. If you do it joined, it'll be a rectangle. So that's the basic difference, and here is how you do it. And I apologize ahead of time for any kind of weirdness you may be seeing with the way that I'm holding my hook or doing stuff. The setup to have the camera is really awkward, and so I kind of, it changes how I do it. So if it looks weird, sorry about that, but this is kind of the best I can do. Short of having somebody come in and film me or something, which would be awkward. So anyways, I'm just going to start out. This is actually a pattern I'm developing right now for a crochet grenade, which is part of my whole Battlefield Bad Company 2 kick that I'm on. And I want to make a crochet grenade with a little crochet happy face attached to the grenade pin. So look for that pattern coming soon. So I've got my chains on there. On the second chain from my hook, I'm going to do 6 single crochet. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6th stitch. Okay, and so there's the first round of 6 single crochet stitches. So my first little V right there is my first stitch, second, third, fourth, fifth, and 6th single crochet. But now, instead of hooking into this stitch here and continuing to single crochet around, I'm going to hook into it, and I'll just use this yarn needle to kind of open the hole up so you can see. So it's that stitch there. We're going to go under that stitch just as you would to be working in the spiral. So you hook into that stitch, yarn over, pull through, and now if you were going to be doing a single crochet in that stitch, you would yarn over and pull through again. But instead of that, what we're going to do is, this is actually going to be a slip stitch. So we're going to pull that yarn over we just did through our loop. So that's been joined now. That's been joined with a slip stitch. And we're going to chain 1, and that chain 1 moves us up 1 step so that we can start our next round. And if you look on my crude illustration, essentially what we've just done is we joined. The chain 1 is the step up to the next round. And then we're going to crochet all the way around, join the last stitch to the first stitch, and then step up 1 again. So basically a join has 2 steps: joining your row that you've just done together and getting yourself ready to do your next one. Now, where do we put our hook? This is where a lot of people get confused and will sometimes start to add extra stitches or lose them by skipping. So the first stitch will be exactly in the same hole where you just joined. So that same hole that you were just in, that you joined into, you're going to do, we're doing an increase in every stitch. So if you count, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that first hole will be an increase. Sometimes when you're joining with other larger stitches like double crochet or triple crochet, a pattern may tell you that the first chain counts as a stitch, or it may tell you that it doesn't. But for most of my stuff, the first chain after you've joined does not count as a stitch, and you want to do your first stitch into that same hole that you joined into. And the reason for that is that essentially every stitch is stacked on top of the respective stitch from the last round. So I'm just going around and doing an increase in every stitch from the previous row. Okay. So now we have, if we look at how many stitches we've got here, we've got our first 2, which was our first increase. Now we've got 4, that's our next 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we have on this round 12 stitches right now, and the pattern called for 6 increases. 12 stitches is 6 increases. But if you look, there's this weird little line here. Some people get confused. They think this is a stitch that they should stitch into and work into, but it's not. This is actually just that join. This is that slip stitch from the previous round, and so what we do is we just pretend like it's not there, and we hook into the first stitch from this round, which is this first little V right here. So this first little single crochet stitch right here, we will hook into it. So right through there, hook in and do a slip stitch to join them. So the slip stitch joins them, and as you can see, it becomes a perfect circle. That gap that was there is kind of gone. And then chain 1 to go on to the next step. So we do 1 single crochet, then an increase, and we continue around, alternating between single crochet and the increase. And it's very helpful when you're working in joined rounds to keep track of how many stitches you should have, because if you have that little bar at the end and you're not sure if you should stitch into it, but you count and you have all the stitches you should have, that means there's no more stitches left to do and it's time to join. The one thing to keep in mind is that joined crochet will give you a seam that runs down your piece and looks like a series of bars. They'll be all kind of in a line. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Some people don't like the way that that looks, and that's fine as well, but usually if I'm recommending using joined rounds, there's a reason for that, and usually that will outweigh the actual seam. So now we're done this third round, and as you can see, we've got that little bar again that looks like it's a stitch, but it's not. And then we've got our first stitch from the same round. And so we're going to go into our first stitch from the same round and do a slip stitch. That has joined our round. And then we will do chain 1 to bring us up to the next step so that we can continue. And I'll just find something that has this piece here is joined, and so you can see right there how you've got these lovely little V's, lovely little V's, lovely little V's, lovely little V's, and just a series of bars. That's what that seam of joins will look like. It's not hugely noticeable, but it does irritate some people. But it is quite helpful when you're trying to work with symmetry, or square shapes, rectangles, anything that requires where an offset or like this, the spiral is not helpful. And that's it for joining, so hope that helps.